Good morning, Highlands, Presbyterian. So today we wrap up our sermon series on Esther. It's kickoff Sunday today. We got a lot of things going on. And one of the things we're doing is a blessing of the blankets. And the tally of blankets tied by our church continues to increase. We've got to be at or near over 100 for the year. Not bad for a small church, right? I was thinking about this last night as I was watching Danielle tie a blanket. It's such a small act, often something we do in the middle of doing something else. And yet, it's this message of love to a child, a lifeline thrown out in the midst of the storm, a reminder to a child of love in the world. And it started incredibly small. In the year 2000, a woman decided to knit one blanket, and she had a goal of 12 for the year, and those 12 she actually collected 87 as some friends joined in. This year they've already collected 20,000 with a goal of 35,000 for the year, each one given to a child in the foster care system. Each act of tying a blanket is an act of advocacy for a child that you'll likely never meet. The hope, right, is that single act leaves a legacy in that child's life. None of us may ever know the extent, the full reach of that. And that's the hope of every act of service that we undertake. We don't know the full result, but we hope that it's like a stone dropped in a pond that ripples out and continues to travel, travel farther and farther away. Think of your own life. Who were teachers? Who were adults in your life that had an impact, one likely great, much larger than they ever could have or would have expected? How did they change your life? Who comes to mind? How did they leave a legacy that continues to unfold? I vividly remember sitting in a pub in Manchester, England, talking to a friend who was in the Marines about what it means to die to yourself, about what it means to live for Christ. This was in 2003, and the Holy Spirit continues to unfold the impacts of that conversation in my life today. That individual leaves a legacy that impacts my wife, my children, my colleagues, my friends, and all of you with whom I get the opportunity to worship and serve continues to ripple out larger and larger. And in our final sermon series in the book of Esther, we find ourselves in the 7th chapter when Esther is hosting a dinner with King Xerxes and with Haman. And there is still, at this time, there's this outstanding order in the kingdom for all of the Jews and the entire kingdom to be killed. Esther has risked her own life. She goes into the throne room to invite Xerxes and Haman to dinner, and this is her moment. In another indescribable act of bravery, Esther asks the king to release her and her people from under the threat of death, for they are about to be destroyed. King Xerxes, he hasn't realized that Esther is Jewish, and he's appalled at the threat facing his queen and her people, and the rest of Haman's plan falls apart. The apparatus that he had constructed for this public execution of Mordecai, and he was so certain that he was going to get exactly what he wanted, that's ready for use, and the king has Haman killed on it before saving the Jews from their destruction. Haman is destroyed by his own pride. Esther's bravery and selflessness delivers the people. There's this incredible contrast between the two, and in that we see our own choices that we make every day when we face the world. Do we want to serve others? Do we want to risk something to serve others? Or do we want to serve ourselves and build up ourselves? Are we trying to build our own kingdoms, which will inevitably fall one way or the other? Or will we invest in others, choosing to join with God in building a kingdom that will stand forever? It's amazing to read this story from 2,500 years ago and think that it's Esther who is remembered and not Haman. As a result of Esther's choices, a celebration began that continues to this day. A legacy is left because she chose to serve others. The festival of Purim, usually celebrated in February or March, continues to be celebrated to this day by the Jewish community. It includes reading the book of Esther, festive meals, costumes, as well as the distribution of gifts or charity to the needy. The costumes are meant to celebrate the hidden nature of God in the book of Esther, where God isn't explicitly mentioned but is clearly working behind the scenes through Esther and through Mordecai and through the community. The charity reflects the need of the Jewish people and the gift of salvation that was given to them through the bravery of Esther. She was willing to risk everything, and as a result of this is a legacy that continues to this day. And when the people reflect on her during Purim, it leads them to be generous in their community. Can we leave legacies like that? It's amazing that her acts of bravery and courage, right, leads the community to continue to gather to this day and celebrate through acts of community, acts of generosity. And so my hope is that as we wrap up this sermon series on Esther, we reflect on her selflessness, on her legacy, and we think about our own. And we think about what it means for us today. And in our reading from 1 Peter 3, he's also speaking of legacy. He uses the word inheritance. The inheritance Peter is referencing is one that we receive from the resurrection of Jesus Christ. That act gives us a legacy of living hope through God's great act of mercy. All of the patterns that we've seen through the book of Easter, they match what we see in the gospel story because this is how God works. We find a people in peril, looking for hope, and we find a champion willing to risk everything for the sake of the people in danger. The enemy who hopes to destroy the people is ultimately doomed, although for a while a very viable threat to the champion as well as to the people. But eventually, God's story wins, and the people opt to celebrate through acts of love, communion, and fellowship. It's true in the book of Esther, it's true in the New Testament, and it should be true for our own life today. A natural desire is to think how we can be more like Esther, and it's commendable, right? I hope we all have the bravery and courage to stand up for those in danger. I've been hearing more and more about the movie The Sound of Freedom, about the U.S. government official who embarks on a mission to save children caught up in trafficking. I don't know a ton about it. I haven't seen it yet. But I want to because the story, the larger narrative, draws me in. How individuals get caught up in a story larger than themselves and realize they have an opportunity to make a difference. Is there a better legacy than transforming the life of a child? It's the same concept we're trying to do through My Very Own Blanket. It's the same thing we're trying to do here in Sunday school. Brenda's doing some great things to adapt Sunday school for the older kids and to challenge and help them grow. And we're trying to leave a legacy of living hope that carries on into the next generation. And I want to stop and just say that this congregation has been a gift to our children. Right? In the years we were in Columbus before we started worshiping at Highlands, we attended a large church with a very robust children's program, and it was good. Kids liked it. But they love it at Highlands. They're drawn here, and it's because of you. It's because of your love and your care and your attention, and Rachel and I are so grateful for that. You're leaving a legacy in the lives of all the children who come here. And it's not just the children, and that's one of the things I love most about the small church, is that the way people attend to one another. The same patience and love that's given to the kids is extended to one another. The small church is not an anonymous place. And in a world where we are anonymous in so much of our lives, often in our communities and in our neighborhoods, when we feel invisible, we're known here. It's noticed when we're not here. May we be in a place where all can come and be known, and be loved, be accepted. with every interaction, with every card, with every handshake, with every conversation, with every follow-up call, with every prayer said for someone going through a hard time. We're leaving a legacy in one another's lives. And who knows what that might turn into. In 1829, there was a British scientist. He died, and he lived his life in Europe. As far as we know, he never visited the U.S. Didn't have any family ties, didn't have any personal ties to the U.S. But at his death, he left his entire estate to the United States of America to create an institution for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. Nobody knows why he did it. It took 7 years for Congress to even accept the gift of about 100,000 pounds, equivalent to about $6 million today. And in the roughly 200 years since, James Smithson's legacy has grown from that into the Smithsonian Institute. Globally known, preeminent leader in science and research. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., you've likely visited one of the 19 museums and galleries, from the Air and Space Museum to the Portrait Gallery to the zoo, all free. His unexpected gift has grown into something that's taken root and changed lives in ways he probably never could have expected, couldn't have dreamed of, hoped for, but it's a legacy he left when he chose to give. May we have that kind of faith, a living hope that can only come from the eternal inheritance that has been given to us by someone willing to risk everything at great personal cost that we might be delivered from our enemy. May we make no mistake, we are at great risk and peril because of the dangers of sin. And Jesus stepped in front of that enemy, took on that peril for himself, and gave us his life so that we might inherit his glory. That's the legacy given to us. And now we have to decide what to do. We have the same choices that were in front of Esther or Haman. Think of Haman had all of the power, and he had wealth. And he could have left an amazing legacy of selflessness, but he was focused on himself, unlike Esther, who didn't have all of the wealth, but she had selflessness. She had a willingness to risk what she had for the sake of others. And because she did that, she's left a legacy that continues to be celebrated by the Jewish community in the festival of Purim to this day. May we celebrate the legacy given to us in Jesus Christ. May we choose generosity. May we commune with one another. Choose acts of love. May we look to what Christ has done and be inspired to have an ongoing celebration. And may we leave legacies and join with God in the kingdom that God is building. Each act of love, each act of care is like placing a brick in that kingdom, joining with God in what God is doing. May we celebrate that gift and give thanks for all that God has done for us, and be amazed at what the Holy Spirit is going to do in the lives of others as we choose to serve, one blanket, one act, one phone call, one hug, one conversation at a time. Thanks be to God.